Here's something that'll keep you up at night. Britain has roughly 700 days before everything changes, and I mean everything. The way you live, work, retire, even whether staying in this country makes sense at all. 700 days, that's it. And here's what makes my blood run cold. 95% of people have absolutely no idea this is coming. Look, I'm going to show you something in the next few minutes that will fundamentally shift how you see the UK's future. Not in some vague, oh, that's concerning way, but in a I need to make actual decisions about my life, right? Now way, because what we've uncovered at UK Housing Insight isn't just one problem we need to fix. It's 6 separate crises, all hitting simultaneously, all feeding into each other like dominoes falling in slow motion. And the terrifying part, they're already falling. Most people just haven't looked down yet. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what's coming, exactly when, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it while there's still time. But I need you to stay with me, because the most crucial information comes at the end. Miss it, and you'll be navigating the next decade blind. First though, let me tell you about something that happened last week that barely made the news. Moody's downgraded Britain's credit rating from AA to AA-. Now I know what you're thinking. Cool story. What does that even mean? Here's what it means. The international financial community just looked at the UK government's books and essentially said, "We're not so confident you can pay us back anymore. This is like your credit score dropping, except it's an entire country." And when that happens, everything gets more expensive. Every government bond, every infrastructure project, every pound we need to borrow, it all costs more now. Britain used to have a AAA rating, perfect credit. Now we're sliding down the ladder, and the government's response, basically, nothing to see here. Everything's fine. But here's what made us start digging deeper at UK Housing Insight. This isn't happening in isolation. This credit downgrade is just a symptom. The disease is much bigger. And that's when the 6 crises became impossible to ignore. Let me hit you with something that should genuinely shock you, but probably won't, because we've become numb to it. The average British worker today earns less in real terms than they did in 2008. Let that sink in. 17 years, an entire generation of working life. And we're poorer now than we were then. That has never happened before in modern British history. Not through world wars. Not through depressions. Never. And it gets worse. UK productivity, how much value we create per hour worked, has completely flatlined. We're now around 20% behind France and Germany. 20%. That means what takes a German worker 4 days takes us 5. Business investment, dead last in the G7. Companies are looking at Britain and deciding to build their factories, their tech hubs, their future somewhere else. Poland, not Birmingham. Berlin, not Manchester. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Without economic growth, everything else collapses. You can't fund the NHS, you can't pay pensions, you can't fix infrastructure. Growth is the oxygen the whole system needs to breathe, and we've been suffocating for over a decade. But wait, it gets worse. While the economy's been flatlining, another crisis has been quietly accelerating, largely ignored. This is the one that genuinely terrifies me, because the math is brutally simple and impossible to escape. Britain's birth rate has collapsed to 1.49 children per woman. The replacement rate, just to stand still, is 2.1. We're nowhere near it. You might think, fewer people, less pressure. If only it worked that way. The population isn't shrinking evenly. Young people aren't having children, but older people are living longer than ever. The result isn't a smaller population, it's an older one. Right now, we have roughly 3 working-age people for every pensioner. That's already tight. By 2040, it drops to 2 to 1. By 2050, we're approaching 1 to 1 worker, funding 1 pensioner, their state pensioner, their NHS care, their social services, everything. It's mathematically impossible. The system doesn't bend, it breaks. Japan is already living this nightmare. 3 decades of stagnation because they've got old before they got rich. South Korea's birth rate is now below 10, the lowest on Earth. Britain is heading down the same path, but with weaker productivity, higher debt, and a housing market that locks capital instead of creating growth. And this is why the next 700 days matter more than most people realize. They're literally going extinct as a society. And Britain, we're on the exact same path, just about 15 years behind. Now before you say immigration will fix it, we need roughly 1 million new people every single year, forever, just to keep the age ratio stable. 1 million every year. That's not politically realistic. But without it, the math simply doesn't work. So we've got an economy that's stopped growing and a population that's rapidly aging to crises that amplify each other. And as we've been warning at UK Housing Insight, this pressure compounds quietly until something breaks. But we're just getting started. Because while all this is happening, something else is literally falling apart around us. This one you can actually see if you know where to look. Britain's water system is leaking around 30% of all water before it even reaches your tap. 30%. Victorian-era pipes are crumbling underground right now, while water companies have paid out billions in dividends and invested barely enough to maintain the system. This isn't a future risk. Major cities could face real water shortages within a decade, not because of climate change, but because the pipes physically can't deliver water anymore. The roads need £14 billion just for emergency repairs, right now, and local councils don't have it. So roads degrade, potholes multiply, and in 10 years large sections of the UK road network will be effectively unusable without massive investment that isn't coming. HS2, remember that? The high-speed rail project meant to modernize Britain has been cut back so many times it may never reach its original destinations. Meanwhile, France, Spain, Japan, and China have built thousands of miles of high-speed rail while we're still arguing. And hospitals. The NHS maintenance backlog is now over £11 billion. Roofs leaking, heating systems failing, operating theatres closing because buildings aren't safe. This is Britain in 2025. Here's what keeps me up at night. When infrastructure decays past a certain point, you enter a doom loop. You can't afford to fix it, so it degrades further, making it even more expensive to repair until fixing it becomes impossible. Several UK infrastructure sectors are already inside that loop, and even perfect infrastructure wouldn't save us from what's happening to the social fabric itself. This one's harder to measure, but it may be the most dangerous of all. A child born in Blackpool has a life expectancy 10 years shorter than a child born in Westminster. Same country, 10-year gap. That's not a healthy society. That's systemic failure. And it's not just regional inequality. It's trust. Trust in government, parliament, police, media, even the NHS is collapsing. When people lose faith in institutions, those institutions stop functioning. It becomes self-fulfilling. Political divisions aren't left versus right anymore. They're leave versus remain. Young versus old, cities versus towns, graduates versus non-graduates. These groups no longer share a common reality. During World War II, Britain endured extreme hardship because there was a shared belief of we're all in this together. That social glue no longer exists. If serious economic pain hits now, there's no solidarity to draw on, just competing groups fighting over a shrinking pie. Crime is rising, police numbers are down, detection rates have collapsed. For most crimes, you're given a reference number for insurance and that's it. When the state can't provide basic security, private security fills the gap. We're already seeing the start of a two-tier system. Wealthy areas with private guards, everyone else simply accepting crime as normal. 5 crises down, but there are still 2 more that make everything else even more fragile. This next one almost nobody talks about and it's genuinely frightening. North Sea oil and gas production has fallen about 75% since 2000. We're now heavily dependent on imported energy. When European gas prices spiked in 2022 and 2023, British energy bills tripled because we are fully exposed to global prices with almost no control. The government had to spend tens of billions subsidizing energy bills just to prevent economic collapse, money we didn't have for a crisis we couldn't stop. That vulnerability hasn't gone away. Coal is gone. Nuclear is aging and closing. We're betting everything on renewables and gas import. If there's another supply shock, or if key import infrastructure fails, blackouts become a real risk. And here's the final kicker. The green transition depends on copper, lithium, and rare earth minerals, resources Britain barely produces. We're almost entirely reliant on global supply chains, largely controlled by China, adding yet another layer of strategic risk to an already fragile system. The materials needed to build wind turbines, solar panels, and batteries. If those supply chains are disrupted, the entire energy transition stops dead. So now we've got 5 interconnected crises, each one amplifying the others. But there's one more, and this one changes everything about how Britain relates to the world. Britain's international position has weakened dramatically over the past decade, and most people haven't fully processed what that really means. We left the EU, our largest trading partner. Trade declined. European investment fell. Frictionless market access disappeared, replaced by paperwork, delays, and higher costs. As we've highlighted at UK Housing Insight, these hidden frictions quietly drain growth year after year. Our so-called special relationship with America is fading. The US is pivoting toward Asia and is far less focused on Europe. Britain's role as a bridge between America and Europe evaporated the moment we left the EU. We're now trying to strike new trade deals with India, Australia, and Asian economies. But we're a mid-sized country negotiating from weakness. We need these deals more than they need us, so we make concessions and accept worse terms. Militarily, the British Army is smaller than at any point since the Napoleonic Wars. The Navy struggles to maintain its fleet. The RAF faces aging aircraft and recruitment shortfalls. Yes, we're still a nuclear power, but in conventional terms, we're a shadow of what we were just 20 years ago. Soft power is valuable, culture matters, but it doesn't protect you when hard security challenges arrive. Being geopolitically isolated and militarily weak is genuinely dangerous. Now here's where this goes from concerning to terrifying. Each of these 6 crises on its own would be painful, difficult, expensive, but manageable. All 6 hitting at the same time. That's systemic collapse, because they're not separate. They feed into each other. Economic stagnation means no money to fix infrastructure. Crumbling infrastructure makes the economy less competitive. Demographic decline reduces workers and consumption. Social fragmentation blocks political reform. Energy vulnerability hurts industry. Geopolitical isolation scares off investment. It's a doom loop. Every problem makes every other problem harder to solve, and we're already inside it. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Northern Ireland's power grid nearly collapsed last winter. Aging infrastructure, rising demand, and tight supply brought it within hours of total failure. If it had gone down, hospitals would have relied on generators. Heating would have failed in winter. Businesses shut, food spoiled, they avoided it only through emergency measures. But nothing fundamental was fixed. All the same conditions still exist, and next time, they might not stop it. That wasn't just a Northern Ireland issue. It was a preview. Or look at council bankruptcies. Birmingham wasn't an anomaly, it was the first domino. Dozens of councils are now on the edge. When a council goes bankrupt, services vanish, libraries close, youth programs disappear, roads aren't repaired, social care is cut to the bone. Then the doom loop kicks in. Young people leave, tax revenue falls, finances worsen, cuts deepen, more people leave. Entire areas begin to hollow out. We're going to see parts of Britain effectively abandon towns where anyone with options has already left. This isn't speculation. It's already happening in parts of the north and Wales, so when does it all come to a head? Here's the uncomfortable truth. It already has. Collapse isn't one dramatic moment, it's gradual degradation that accelerates. Here's how the next 5 years likely unfold. In 2026, more council bankruptcies, NHS waiting times hit new records, energy bills stay high, real wages continue falling, social unrest rises, nothing explosive, just everything noticeably worse. In 2027, the first major infrastructure failure, a regional blackout, a water crisis in a major city, a critical transport breakdown. The government promises fixes it can't afford. People begin to realize this isn't temporary, it's structural. From 2028 to 2029, a full economic crisis, either an external recession or a domestic debt shock. Unemployment spikes, borrowing costs become unsustainable. Real austerity begins, not like 2010, but deep cuts to core services people assumed were untouchable. Everyone feels it building toward 2032, a social breaking point. Protests, strikes, possibly riots. Governments unable to last full terms because nothing works. Political instability becomes normal, not exceptional. From 2033 onwards, Britain faces 2 possible paths. Either radical reforms that completely restructure the system, painful, disruptive, but potentially effective, or a managed decline into a medium-income country with deteriorating services and a steady exit of skilled workers. The second, the path is far more likely than the first. So you're probably thinking, great, you've terrified me. Now what? Let me be direct about what actually matters, because this part is crucial, and this is something we've been clear about at UK. How's an insight? Stop assuming the state will be there for you. Pensions, healthcare, social care. Plan as if these will not exist in any meaningful form when you need them. That isn't pessimism, it's realism, based on the math and trends already in motion. Second, build geographical optionality. If your skills travel, research where else you could live. I'm not saying you must leave Britain, but you need options. A plan B that isn't hope things improve. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and several European countries are actively recruiting skilled workers. They have problems too, but not this specific combination of crises. Third, invest in portable assets. UK property is illiquid and local. UK does easily turn a house in Birmingham into flexibility if you need to move. Think international equities, globally recognized, skills, and professional networks that cross borders. Assets that move with you matter more than assets tied to one postcode. Fourth, build personal resilience. Energy disruptions, water shortages, infrastructure failures. These are increasingly likely in the coming years. Basic preparation isn't paranoia anymore. Backup power, water storage, emergency supplies, sensible steps in an unstable system. Fifth, community matters more than ever. Strong social networks become critical when institutions fail. Know your neighbors, build trust. Communities that cooperate weather disruption far better than isolated individuals. Sixth, diversify financially across institutions and jurisdictions. Don't keep everything in UK banks. Consider exposure to harder currencies or value-preserving assets. This isn't a bunker mentality, it's reducing concentration risk in a fragile system. Seventh, use NHS services now while they still function. Get procedures done before waiting lists stretch into years. Address health issues early. Your health is an asset that compounds. Neglecting it is long-term costs. Eighth, if you have children, think about education with international mobility in mind. Languages, STEM skills, globally recognized qualifications. They need the ability to work anywhere, because Britain in 2050 may not offer the opportunities previous generations assumed. Look, I'm not hoping for any of this. I'm not accelerating it. I'm recognizing patterns and extrapolating from real data. Everything I've shown you comes from official statistics, mainstream research, or observable reality. Could Britain change course? Technically, yes. A government could implement radical reforms, accept short-term pain, and restructure the system. It's possible, but I can't plan my life on the assumption politicians suddenly become brave and competent. I have to plan based on what's most likely, and what's most likely is continued gradual decline, punctuated by periodic acute crises until something fundamental breaks. I don't know what that breaking point will be. A debt crisis, infrastructure failure, social unrest, or simply a slow grind until we're no longer a first-world country by any meaningful definition. What I do know is this: individuals who see what's coming and prepare will fare infinitely better than those who don't. The gap between someone who adapts and someone who assumes normal will continue as the gap between security and devastation. This isn't pessimism or optimism. It's realism. Britain is facing 6 interconnected crises with no clear solutions and no political will to implement the painful solutions that might exist. That isn't a recipe for stability. It's a recipe for decline. The UK we've known for 75 years, prosperous, stable, with comprehensive public services and rising living standards, is ending. What replaces it depends on decisions being made right now. But those decisions aren't being made well, and often aren't being made at all. You can't control the government. You can't fix the NHS, pensions, or infrastructure alone. But you can control your preparation, your positioning, and your response to what comes next. The question isn't, is Britain collapsing? The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because the collapse is already underway, it's just happening slowly enough that most people haven't noticed yet.